This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for this first edition of CBN NewsWatch for Wednesday, August 7th. I'm Mark Martin. Today, President Trump visiting the scenes of the mass shootings in Dayton, Ohio and El Paso, Texas, despite some local opposition, and what we're learning about the young men behind the mass shootings. Trade war escalation. The stock market has stabilized from the shock of higher trade tensions with China. But is President Trump winning this trade battle? The head of U.S. Customs and Border Protection tells CBN News what he says is really happening on the border with Mexico, as opposed to some of what you're hearing in the headlines. And racial healing, how one man has taken on that problem one person at a time. Those stories and more today on NewsWatch. We begin with President Trump's visits to Dayton, Ohio and El Paso, Texas today. White House officials say his visits will be similar to those to the scenes of previous mass shootings in Parkland, Florida and Las Vegas. The shooter who killed 9 people in Dayton had long wrestled with mental illness, and a woman who dated him said he wrestled with suicidal thoughts, uncontrollable urges to unleash violence, and had a fascination with tragedy.
He was interested in what makes terrible people do terrible things.
This individual, the shooter, very specifically seeking out information that promotes violence.
But the mayor of Dayton says the focus needs to be on more than mental health to stop mass shootings.
If you just do mental health and don't do gun work on common sense gun legislation, we will not be successful in this fight.
Meanwhile, the gunman in El Paso is showing no remorse for killing 22 people. Officials there have confirmed that he did not originally plan to launch his attack at Walmart, but he was targeting the Mexican community in the city. The president will make his trip as many Democrats are attacking him, saying his rhetoric on immigration has been very divisive. Vice President Mike Pence spoke about the power of faith and prayer to help heal in the aftermath of the devastating tragedies like this past weekend's mass shootings.
The Bible tells us that if his people who are called by his name will humble themselves and pray, that he'll hear from heaven and he'll heal our land. And in this dark hour for the people of El Paso and Dayton, we do well to pray.
Amen. Pence went on to talk about the importance of community, saying the greatest form of community in the modern world is faith. The fight for life continues in Arkansas. A federal judge on Tuesday ruled 3 abortion restriction laws that were blocked from taking effect will now be put on hold. The laws include a measure prohibiting abortion 18 weeks into pregnancy and a requirement that doctors performing abortions be board certified or board eligible in obstetrics and gynecology. The third law prohibits doctors from performing an abortion if it's being sought because the fetus was diagnosed with Down syndrome. All 3 laws were blocked from taking effect last month, but the state's attorney general immediately filed a notice appealing that decision. Tensions are settling between the U.S. and China after China let its currency sink and halted purchases of U.S. farm goods. Some say a U.S.-China trade war could harm the global economy. Charlene Aaron has that story.
The market made a partial comeback Tuesday after China indicated it would stabilize its currency. But today, they've weakened it again. Stocks bounced back after Monday's calamitous 767-point drop-off. The Dow gaining 311 points and the S&P closing up 1.3%, the first gain in 7 days. But there's anxiety today after China once again devalued the yuan. This despite a statement Tuesday from its central bank governor pledging not to use exchange rates for competitive purposes and to keep the Chinese currency at a reasonable and balanced level. Now it appears China is at it again, setting the rate just below 7 yuan to the dollar. Despite the uncertainty, the Trump administration says China is getting the worst of this trade war.
They're in poor shape economically. We're in great shape economically. And frankly, the biggest loser is China right now.
Stephen Moore, an economist with the Heritage Foundation, agrees.
They're just not growing nearly as fast as they had been. The other thing that's happening is because of this trade war, there's a lot of disinvestment. Investors from around the world are pulling their money out of China because they're very worried about the future of that country.
However, China's state-owned businesses are pledging not to buy U.S. agricultural products, putting the hurt on American farmers. The president took to Twitter saying, "Our great American farmers know that China will not be able to hurt them." Kudlow promises farmers will continue to get assistance from the White House.
Farmers have been great. They're patriots. They've backed us 100%.
China's aggressive action comes after the administration threatened to impose new tariffs on $300 billion of Chinese goods. Moore says China has been abusing its trade relationship with the U.S. for decades, and it's getting worse every day.
They have walked back from the agreement that President Trump had with them, or at least he thought that he had with them. They are engaged in all sorts of issues with respect to national security. They're stealing our intellectual property. They have not opened up their markets to our producers the way we've opened up our markets to them. So Trump is fighting the good fight here.
In the end, he believes the two sides will reach an agreement because China needs U.S. markets.
There's an old saying that Trump used to say that if we can't trade with China, we sneeze. If they can't trade with us, they catch pneumonia.
One issue that could blow up trade negotiations is if China cracks down with its military on the ongoing protests in Hong Kong. China has released a propaganda video showing armed forces engaged in anti-riot training. Tuesday, China warned the protesters not to mistake patience for weakness. China and the U.S. are expected to resume trade negotiations in September. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Coming up, as the mass shooting in El Paso again brings up the issue of illegal immigration and border security, CBN News spoke with the head of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and you'll hear why he calls some controversies in the news about what's happening on the border, quote, a flat-out lie.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Get the top political news and analysis from Washington on Faith Nation, tonight at 6 Eastern, only on the CBN News Channel.
The mass shooting in El Paso puts more attention on the polarized issue of border security. CBN's David Brody sat down with the head of U.S. Customs and Border Protection to discuss the situation, including charges of concentration camps on the border and the controversy over family separations.
The hot issue of immigration is even hotter after the suspected El Paso shooter confessed to targeting Hispanics invading the country.
Let's make no mistake, this was done by an individual who was sick, who was evil.
Mark Morgan is acting commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and he spoke with CBN News about the tragedy and whether rhetoric from President Trump is to blame.
He is the one responsible for the murder of those individuals and nobody else.
How concerned are you about some of the rhetoric?
I think rhetoric is in one category, and then the acts of this individual, this depraved coward, is in another category.
For the former Marine and FBI agent, the deadly shooting just adds to an already busy and controversial list. Recently, he's had to deal with accusations from far-left Democrats that the border detention centers are more like concentration camps.
I was just outraged. I mean, it's unbelievable to me that that's not just rhetoric. If somebody says, anybody says, that we're running concentration camps, that's just a lie. It's a flat-out lie.
He says another flat-out lie is the notion family separation is an official administration policy.
There's never been a family separation policy. It doesn't exist. It never will exist. It was a zero-tolerance policy, which meant if you came here under Statute 1325, you came here illegally, that was a crime. Just like we do in the interior United States. If someone commits a crime and they go to jail, Child Protective Services take the children.
Morgan says roughly 1 million people will illegally enter America this year. The challenge is that the U.S. system isn't equipped to deal with the increase in migrant families.
Back in the 90s, 2000s, we reached over 1 million, but the majority of those were adult males, and we sent them back right away. Now, the majority, 65%, are family units and children. And because of our broken laws, they're released into the interior United States, never to be heard from again. That's what we have to focus on.
Morgan says Congress must fix certain loopholes to discourage the heavy influx.
They could pass legislation in 15 minutes and 85–90% of this crisis would go away.
Do you have any hope that Congress will step up to the plate? I mean, it's been years, decades.
None. They're not going to pass any meaningful legislation to address the loopholes in our legal framework.
Despite Congress's inaction, Morgan, who also worked for President Obama, says President Trump has been a man of action.
This president and this administration has done more to address this crisis than any other administration before. The government of Mexico has stepped up, and they are supporting this as a regional crisis in unprecedented ways like they have never done before. And that's a direct result of this president.
And speaking of Mexico, that brings us to, yes, the wall. Is the wall being built? If so, how much of it, and what are the plans for the future?
So the answer to that is yes, absolutely. The wall is being built. Right now, I think we're up to about 55 miles of new wall that has been built.
A recent Supreme Court decision allowing the administration to use Defense Department funding for construction will ramp things up.
That's probably going to give us the ability to build in excess of 450 miles. The majority of that, we're going to have that done by the end of 2020.
In Mark Morgan's busy world, he just focuses one day at a time. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Still ahead with race, a major issue in America today. We're going to bring you again the story of one man who's taking on this subject in his own way, one person at a time.
Give me that. Bye. Sure, life is busy, but I found a way to make a huge difference in people's lives. I guess you could say I'm changing the world right here from home. I bring medical supplies and doctors to people in need, and dig wells so that villagers can have clean and safe water to drink. I make it possible to preach the gospel in over 100 countries, including right here in America. And when disaster strikes, I'm there, providing food, thank you, and emergency supplies to give people hope again. Every day, CBN and I are making the world a better place. Here you go. My life is hectic, so I joined CBN through Pledge Express. My bank does all the work, and I know that my gift is being used where it's needed most. So become a CBN partner and join Pledge Express, because you can do a world of good right from where you are. Hi, good morning. Are you ready to get started?
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Get Protect Your Sleep and live your best life with innovative information from 5 leading sleep experts.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
Discover a sleep-enhancing bedtime routine, how to put insomnia to rest, learn how to relieve pain that disturbs sleep, and much more in Protect Your Sleep.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Don't miss out on this brand new series.
Welcome back. When it comes to talking about race in America, tensions have often run high for years. Even within the black community, there can be disagreement on what's the right approach. Caitlin Burke brings us the story of one man who has taken on this issue in his own way, one person at a time.
Playing music comes as naturally as breathing for 58-year-old blues musician Daryl Davis.
Well, I've been playing music professionally full-time since 1980, when I graduated college at the age of 22.
Through music, Davis has formed some unique friendships.
That's Sam Phillips, the man who discovered Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, the boxer Joe Frazier, Dolly Parton.
And also unlikely ones.
And that was the head of the Maryland Ku Klux Klan.
How did you get to be friends with members of the KKK?
I just happened to be, in 1983, country music had made a resurgence in this country. So I was the only black guy in this country band, and consequently, the only black guy in many of the places where we played.
One place was the Silver Dollar Lounge in Frederick, Maryland. After a performance, a white man stopped Davis as he walked off the stage.
And he says, you know, I really like your all's music. And I said, thank you. I shook his hand, and I don't drink, but I went back to his table and I had a cranberry juice with him. And then he makes the remark, when the waitress brings my cranberry juice, he clinks my glass and cheers me. And he says, you know, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man. Well, now I'm thinking, wow, you know, what's going on here? You know, this guy's really having a night of firsts. And I said, why? And again, I was naive, and I wasn't trying to be facetious. And I said, well, why is that? He stared at the tabletop and didn't answer me. And he had a friend sitting next to him. He goes, tell him. I said, tell me. And finally he says, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan.
Since age 10, when first confronted with the realities of racism, Davis pondered one question. How can you hate me when you don't know me? His unlikely KKK connection inspired him to start getting answers.
Some years later, I decided I was going to write a book on the Klan.
His research often put him in some dangerous situations, but it also led to an unexpected change in the relationship he shared with certain Klan members.
I would ask them questions, and they would answer the questions, but they wouldn't ask for my opinion. And then over time, you know, I would say, so what do you think about blah, blah, blah? And they would say, well, I think da, 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 da. And then they would say, well, what do you think about it, Daryl? Oh, wait a minute. All of a sudden I have value?
Davis says he's convinced 25 members of the Ku Klux Klan to leave the organization simply through friendly conversation.
And when they did so, they gave me their robes and hoods. That's just not done. You know, this uniform represents white supremacy. And you're taking it off and giving it to a black man?
As a new generation of African Americans enter adulthood, they're fighting racism their own way. Rather than trying to change one mind at a time, as Davis has done, this activist generation is using social media to reach the masses.
Some in the Black Lives Matter movement have been critical of Davis, saying he's defeating their purpose with his relational approach.
The fact that I would sit down and spend so much time with the enemy when I should be devoting my time to changing the system of white supremacy.
Davis believes this younger generation has the right intent, although their methods can taint the mission.
You need a multi-pronged attack from the front, from the side, from the back, through the rear window, whatever. You don't change the system without changing the people behind the system. Okay? That's why I'm sitting down with them, and I've had success.
Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Baltimore, Maryland.
Powerful story there. Well, coming up, from a best-selling novel to the big screen, a movie coming out this weekend will bring you a look at the art of racing in the rain, a story told through the eyes of a dog. We'll take a look at the new film when we come back.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
As the nations rage, you can stand with Israel.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
Call 1-800-700-7000 and get to life.
This is our nature as a country.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he have, which color he is, this is what I'm doing.
Support Israel in their time of need. Get to Life, now available on DVD. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
And I wish that other people throughout the world could see this side of Israel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Out the CBN News Daily Rundown podcast each weekday with me, Caitlin Burke. Click on the show tab at cbnnews.com where you can listen and subscribe.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
Thanks for staying with us. It was a best-selling novel, and now it's a major movie. Actor Patrick Dempsey put on his producing hat to bring the art of racing in the rain to the big screen. Studio 5's Ephraim Graham brings us this look at a heartfelt tale told through the eyes of a philosophical dog who sounds a lot like Kevin Costner.
He picked me out of a pile of pups, a tangled mass of paws and tails. He'd stopped at the farm on his way home from the speedway at Yakima. Hey. Even back then, I knew I was different than other dogs. My soul just felt more human. This one.
And so begins the storybook bond of a man, a race car driver, and his dog, Denny and Enzo, in the film The Art of Racing in the Rain.
And so I had my first glimpse at the rest of my life.
The book stayed on the bestsellers list for a long time, translated into almost 40 different languages. Intimidating to come and try and bring something that people love so dearly to the screen?
Yeah, I'd say that was something to bear in mind. But on the other hand, you think, well, people love this story, so hopefully they'll love the film if we do a decent job.
Simon Curtis directs the film. Mark Bombach is the screenwriter.
It is a story about a person who's an athlete who's pursuing this very, very, very difficult dream, which is to race at the highest level. And he winds up falling in love and starting a family. The dog was almost functioning like a guardian angel, or like God, that there's this presence in the room that loves you more than you love yourself. And that was probably the thing on the emotional front that really grabbed me.
Enzo, this is Eve.
Hi, Enzo. How you doing?
My first impression of Eve was as complicated as the scents in the air.
Not really much of a dog person.
A melange of produce, shampoo, and pheromones.
Well, he's more person than dog.
Milo Ventimiglia and Amanda Seyfried play the roles of Denny and Eve.
What is it about this story for both of you that made you decide to do it, and it feels like you love it?
Oh, it's got everything. I mean,
yeah.
I want to be happy in life. I really, truly want to laugh, and I really want to cry, and I want to feel alive.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to go to the movies and have that entire experience. I need it.
Yeah. I think the reminder of the human element, you know, told through the lens of a dog that just so desperately wants to be the best possible version of a human in his next
So
life.
heartbreaking.
It's so heartbreaking, but it's inspiring because here's a dog that isn't a person, but wants to be the best version of one. I think that's inspiring to all of us that are people to say, hey, wait a minute, we can be a better version of ourselves.
Yeah.
Anytime you can.
I just have to get in here. Pick it up, hold it.
You've met the actors Amanda and Milo, but the real star of the film is this guy, Butler, one of 2 dogs who brings the character of Enzo to life, and he does such a great job. What do you say for yourself? Good dog.
They were married at a magnificent palace with its very own ocean. The kind of place I had assumed only existed on television. I tried my best to be helpful. I minded my manners, resisted snacking on the trays of exquisite appetizers, and made sure to do my business in the flower bed farthest from the festivities.
Your character, Denny, faces a lot. Why doesn't he break?
There is no choice. Yeah, I think Gary Cole had a line in the movie, I can't get it right, but basically was, Denny asks him, he says, what if I don't succeed? I think Gary Cole responds something along the lines of like, you know, you gotta show up. I don't ruin that moment. But there is no other option. There is no other option, especially when it comes to his family, to his wife, to his daughter. No, you have to be the best version of yourself you can be. Responsibility, but also honor and duty and all of that to your family.
Right there.
He's been down almost a full lap this whole stint.
It's not about who's got the heavier foot, it's about feel. Denny was the first to make the call to switch to rain tires. Hey, what's this? Reminds me what they used to say about Santa. When it rains, it doesn't rain on him.
And the film will be in theaters on Friday, and you can get a behind-the-scenes look in tonight's edition of Studio 5. You can also see a powerful interview with pastor and recording artist Travis Green and see how baseball great Darryl Strawberry is taking on the opioid crisis. It's all on Studio 5 tonight, beginning at 9:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel. That's going to do it for today's first edition of Newswatch. You can find more on the issues you care about most at cbnnews.com and can watch CBN News programs anytime on our CBN News channel. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day.